Okay, now the meeting we are, online in YouTube also. And I think we should start. Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Dipanjal Dekha. I'm the Secretary in Northeast Writers Forum. And on behalf of the Northeast Writers Forum, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the participants and our illustrious panelists. This is one of the series which we were doing, we had two kind of series. One was a workshop for the students, and this is for the Northeast Writers Forum, the main events. And we have been calling in a lot of authors and eminent authors and poets, to basically discussing various matters. Today, our topic of discussion is in another tongue is again a very special thing, particularly for Northeast, not only for Northeast, I believe even for entire India in general. Northeast, as you know, we got the 8 states. I'm talking about the Sikkim inclusive. We got probably almost around 400 tribes, along with as many languages. They've got their own poems. They've got their own stories, folklores, which are invaluable treasures, but to a large extent unknown to the rest of the world, I can say. Now, this particular problem which we have, we can transcend it, we can overcome this barrier, the barrier of language, by only one way, which is translation, which is the main topic of our discussion today. For our discussion today, we got our panelists, 3 panelists from the 3 states of Northeast. We got Margaret Jama from Mizoram, Vijay Tam Singh from Manipur, we got Professor Ashish Gupta from Tripura, and we got a moderator from Assam. I would leave the honors of introducing our illustrious panelists to our moderator, Dr. Stuti Maladwara. But before I hand over the stage to her, I'd like to do a formal introduction to her. Dr. Stuti Maladwara is a writer, an academician, and a media person. Her books in English include 3 novels, 3 collections of short stories, 4 books of poems, apart from the articles in academic books, journals, and newspapers. European Rhapsody is her book on travels. Her article, A Visit to Kaziranga and Sibsagar, is included in the state class 9 English textbook. Her text in Asmus includes 6 storybooks for children, 3 children novels, a collection of short stories, and a novel. She is an Asia professor and head of Department of English, Hamdi Girls College, Guwahati, Assam. She was awarded the Nari Shakti Award in 2015 by the Lions Club and the Woman of the Year 2016 by International Human Rights Council Assam chapter. And the Women Achievers Awards in Literature in 2019. She was also a news presenter in television for 20 years. She has acted in television, serial, and on stage in more than 50 radio plays. One of our very well-known senior members of our forum. Dr. Stuti Maladwara, I'd like to hand over the stage to you.
Thank you, Dipanjal. Thank you, Dipanjal. Good evening to all of you. The topic, as Dipanjal had said, today is In Another Tongue. Now, Umberto Eco, the Italian scholar and novelist, said, translation is the art of failure. And Thomas Bernhard, the very well-known Austrian novelist, said that translation is a different book, a book by the person who translated it and having nothing to do with the original at all. But we cannot deny that translation helps in cutting across language barriers and interacting with people in such countries. Now, without translations, we would not have had the opportunity to read great books. As Keats had said in his poem on first looking into Chapman's Homer, he said that only when George Chapman had translated Homer into English, he could read and appreciate. So reading literature from a culture different from one's own helps people to develop a wider understanding of the world around them. So this wider understanding can have innumerable positive effects. We need translations But there are challenges in translations. And that's what our panelists are here to discuss today. As Dipanjal had said that we have in our panel Margaret Zama, who had joined from Mizoram, Tayanam Bijoy Kumar Singh from Manipur, Ashish Gupta from Tripura. Let me introduce our panelists. Margaret Zama. She is a professor, former professor in English, Mizoram University. She was a registrar of Mizoram University. She has several publications in established academic journals and had edited books and journals, as well as done translations from Mizo to English, published by Sage, Katha, Sahitya Academy, Writers Workshop, etc., etc. It is also my pleasure to inform you that Margaret Zama is a founder member of Northeast Writers Forum. It was essentially through her initial efforts that the forum's Mizoram chapter was formed. Moreover, her contribution to the compiling of the 5 volumes of stories from the Northeast, way back in 1999 by the forum, in collaboration with Katha, the well-known publishing house from Delhi, is something every member is proud of. And we have with us Tayanam Bijoy Kumar Singh. He is an electrical engineer by profession and a writer by inclination. He writes short fictions, essays, and poetry in English as well as in Manipuri. He also translates from Manipuri into English and vice versa. Some of his works in English are taught at some universities. And now we have also with us Ashish Gupta. Ashish is a professor in the Department of English, Tripura University. In his capacity as a documentary filmmaker on aspects of Northeast, he has created a rich audio-visual archive of lesser-known aspects of his homeland. His literary works include Colorscapes, Theorizing Colors, The Fragrant Doom, translation of modern Kokborok poetry to English. The Fragrant Doom Revisited, a translation of modern Kokborok poetry to English. Then The Mystic Mountain, an anthology of Tripura Bangla poetry in English, among others. So we have with us eminent panelists who have done quite a lot of translations. So now to begin our discussion, first I would like to put my question to Margaret. So what, according to you, Margaret, are the qualities of good translation?
My screen says that my internet connection is poor, but I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. What was your question? Challenges of
what
qualities
are the qualities? Yes, what are the qualities of good translation, do you feel?
Yeah. There are several qualities for not only good translation, but that of a translator also. So maybe we can take it together. Yes. Shruti, you know what I've done? Because you had given us your questions earlier, I had kind of just jotted down some points. So I'll occasionally be, looking into my notes, although this is an informal discussion. To have a good translation, I feel, first of all, it is important to be able to identify a good text. The text. That is very important for a translator. And the translator has a lot of reading to do in the selection of the text. Just cannot pick up a text from somewhere without, any kind of a background knowledge of the culture or of the writer and things like that. So and this has to be followed by very close reading by the translator of the text in order to be able to produce a good translation. So I feel that's very important, first of all, and then because he is going to, the translator is going to present that translation to us to read, to the readers, to the reading public. So we also have to know, what is going on in the translation. The translator, when I talk about selection of a proper text and to understand the work that he has translated and to do a close reading, it's actually also to discover the center of the writer. Where does the writer come from? Not meaning, geographically, locationally, but what is the writer? In other words, the writer, we are told by scholars, translation scholars, the writer has some mini mansions in himself, spaces in himself. And this is the mind of the writer. So to that extent, we have to be careful about the text we select, and we have to read it very, very carefully. So good translation and a good translator practices ethics. And I think this is important also as qualities of good translation. The practice of ethics. And by this, what I mean is the translator has to approach the work with an open mind. He should not be prejudiced beforehand with preconceived notions, or he has to translate with an open mind. By this, I'll just give an example. For example, I have selected a text which is not necessarily feminist in nature and in character, but because of my own ideological leanings, for example, I can actually turn it into a feminist piece. That's what I mean. So ethics has to be here. We have to discover the center, the mini mansions of the writer, and not let our own ideological leanings, take too much scope there. Of course, this in a way is a point for politics of translation also, which later on maybe, we can expand on. But this is very interesting because it does happen with some translations. So, while the translators expect to have confidence in herself, himself, there must be some degree of self-erasement. Of course, I don't know if all will agree with me on this. The translator must understand that the writer is number one. The writer and his work is number one. And translator is actually secondary, as it were. And then another point I feel which is very important for a good translation is the competence of the translator in both the source language and the target language. The translator has to be competent in both of these. Otherwise, the translation won't work out well. So that competence has to be there. But, it is not just competent language competency moving from one language to another, but it also involves a sensitivity, sensitivity towards the culture that has promoted the space of the writer and thereby is able to capture the soul of the text that is being translated. I think you get my meaning there.
Yes,
a translator can be very, very language competent. But if there is no soul in that translation, something is missing. That is why the first point that I made about proper selection of text, a very close reading of the text is important. Otherwise, I think, all of us sitting in, we can add to what we feel features or qualities of a good translation. But I think these are the main, features. Thank you.
Right.
That will do for now, I think.
Yeah,
And my screen
Margaret,
keeps saying, my screen keeps saying that your internet connection is unstable.
But
So
we heard you, Margaret. Thank you. Bijoy, what do you have to say about the skills of a translator?
Skills of a translator. Margaret has also said something.
Yes.
What
would you have anything to add to it?
Yeah,
whatever she said.
Yeah. The main skill of a translator is the ability to write and adhere to the given framework. Not in literature, but in other types of translation, some framework is given, but in literature we are free. I'm talking about translator as a whole, not only for literature. So the main skill of a translator will be ability to write and adhere to a given set of frameworks, and then there should be clarity and accuracy and naturalness in the translation. And a good translator should be able to transfer into the target language the style, tone, and cultural elements accurately
Yes.
from the source language into the target language. Yeah, that's all.
No. Yeah, Vijay. Thank you, Vijay. Ashish,
Yeah.
Ashish, can you hear me? Are you? Is your audio okay now? So, Ashish, can you tell us about translation techniques? Is
He has to put on
Ashish,
his
you have
mic.
to unmute yourself.
Yeah, he has to unmute.
Now, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the question like? What is the
About
question?
the translation techniques. What do you have to say about the translation techniques?
I think what Professor Zama and Vijay has spoken about amounts to the same thing. Like, what are the exact techniques of a good translator?
Yeah.
The first thing, obviously, is perception and sensitivity towards the culture, which is the target culture of the target. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes,
The
yes,
first
Ashish,
thing
you
that
are
a
audible.
translator should possess, the first thing that a translator should possess as a technique is what we
We have lost him, I think. We have till he comes back. Can we move on to something else? Let's talk about something else till he comes back.
Yeah.
We have lost him. Yeah. He was talking about culture, like, about culture things. So I want to ask you, like, Margaret, about culture oriented words. When you are translating something from Mizo, you have done translations from Mizo into English. So, like, what is the problem that you face? Like, for culture oriented words, some words are so typical that it's very difficult to translate it and into English. Ashish, will come back to you.
I get.
Margaret, your audio.
I think he's back. Is he back?
Yeah.
In fact, I'll club this question. My audio, yeah, it's on.
Yes.
Can you hear me? It's on.
That's cracking.
You can. So is it all right now?
Yes.
Okay. It's too bad, the internet is really playing up tonight. I want to club my answer for this question with that first question that you had posed to us in your list. That is, what are the difficulties we face as a translator, and is literary translation difficult? You had asked that question. And what I want to say is, personally, for me has been translating from Mizo source that I have done. I have not experimented translating other language or with any other. There are two aspects of challenges that I have faced and continue to face. See, in literary translation, personally, since you mentioned about Mizo language, I am always driven by the need to be very circumspect and faithful to the text. Although we are told that, a literal translation, particularly of cultural words is really not possible, and we are likely to even make a hash of things. So, but you know, the need to be circumspect and faithful to the text has been very important to me, and this has involved actually a relearning of the Mizo language for me. You might find this a little strange, but what I mean is, when I say relearning the Mizo language for me, that is, you know, because for me, up to a certain point, reading of Mizo texts had been merely leisure reading. I had never really done any kind of an in-depth reading, and my reading list of Mizo books had been very limited earlier. So, you know, when I got into translation, I had to kind of relearn my own mother tongue, in the sense that I had to really do more serious reading. So that was one of the challenges. And, you know, also teaching in a department of English and also being bilingual, I had obviously always tended to gravitate towards, you know, writings in English and so on. So, you know, that's one challenge that I have faced. Now, the other one is, you know, regarding literary translation from Mizo to English. I don't know if it is the same with some of the languages in the hills in our region, but for me, it has meant translating from a language that is source language, the Mizo, to a language which has a much more richer, longer history, especially in terms of its borrowing of loan words. For example, David Crystal tells us that the English language contains more than, 300, it has borrowed words from more than 350 languages. And, you know, to start translating into that language, it was a challenge of a different kind, because, you know, the scope and the range of English was so vast for me, and yet limiting also, because as a translator, I have to not get carried away, if you know what I mean, and not stray into meanings and nuances that are not contained in the source language text. So I think this is one, but I also want to say, you know, that language, Mizo has a far more limited vocabulary, no doubt about that. But it is also an extremely tonal and orally expressive language, you know. So that is, I think, one of the challenges that I have.
Yes, it will be difficult, yes.
Yeah, I have felt very, very strongly. And so, you know, very briefly to get to that question you had asked about
Culture oriented.
culture, culturally, you know, culture specific kind of terms. Yeah, this is especially translating, as I said, from a tonal, oral based kind of language, you know, particularly, Mizo, a tribal language of the hills and so on. I have always met my biggest challenges in this. And we have been told by theorists, you know, whether we are translating idioms and proverbs or slangs and colloquialisms also, this would indeed be challenges for us. So what I have done is, because these are very culture specific, these are created by a culture, not necessarily shared. So if I can find an equivalent, you know, the semantic equivalents are more important. Right. So if I can find its equivalents, it seems to be all right so far. It seems to have worked for me so far. And, you know, I've been able to manage in that sense. And because we know that when it comes to technical or commercial or even literary translations, the situations are all different in these cases, and in a way even more difficult. So because technical translations have their own linguistic domain. Now, with particular reference to slangs and colloquialisms also, no doubt, you know, that racy flavor gets lost in translation, no doubt about that. And I have experienced this when we are trying to translate it into correct terms or trying to seek equivalent colloquial expressions. And sometimes it can get very awkward. So where it cannot be avoided, I give my notes
Equivalent
to
to
that.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Notes, footnotes you
I
mean.
give my I give my notes to that, and or I inbuild within the translation
Right.
text, within the translated text, I just inbuild an extra few words. I mention the word first in the original source language, and then kind of move on to
Okay.
talk about what it
So
is.
that's
So
how you
that
do
is
it.
how I have managed. Yeah, that's how I have managed. Yeah.
Okay, now, Ashish, can you hear us now? Ashish, can you hear us? Ashish, can you hear us now?
I can hear you, right?
Okay.
Hello.
So, yeah. So, Ashish, like we were talking about culture-oriented words. So it's like, in Ohomia, I had come across this word biaghor, which was very difficult for me to translate. Like, when we were doing a translation workshop with Katha, Northeast Writers Forum, and while we were discussing, this word came up, biaghor. So biaghor is a word you cannot translate because there are so many cultural connotation. It's very difficult to translate. So have you come across such words in Kokborok, and you have done Tripura Bangla? So how did you tackle? That's what we want to know. Ashish?
Can you hear me now? Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Ashish.
Sometimes I'm not. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to ask this question. What is this culture oriented word? Which word is exactly not culture oriented? Like, give you an example to that. What is that which is not culture oriented? Every word belongs to a particular language. Every language belongs to a particular culture. In that sense, every word is culture oriented. We cannot have a non-cultural word. Hence,
Okay.
therefore, translating every word or any word for that
Yeah, Bijoy.
Can I add something to what
Yes.
Professor Margaret and
Yeah.
also just said? So I have done the same thing like Professor Margaret has done. So when I use a local language, I try to put the meaning in the sentence itself. This is possible
Yes,
sometimes,
inbuilt,
and
yes.
sometimes, inbuilt. And sometimes it's not possible. So I give glossary at end. And one more thing is very important to know the target language, whether I'm doing the translation for academics or for the general public. If I'm doing it for the academics, I will give lots of glossaries, all the references and all. This is my own experience. I have translated Robin Thiem's 3 plays. It was the most difficult task for me. So one play I translated without any footnote, without any glossary. Then on the second play, initially I translated only two, sorry. The third one was done later. And the second play, I used lots of footnotes and references. And since the plays are based in Manipur and the language uses archaic language, even I don't know. So for this, I had to do research. I have to do lots of things like I had to sit with the actors when they deliver the dialogues. Intonation of some of the words are very important. Since it is archaic language, you can't know the meaning by simply reading the text. Text doesn't give the full intonation. When the actors deliver the dialogue, then you can have a good idea of it. So this two plays were translated for a group of people. I mean, there were some 32 people, so from the US, England, and Australia. In that group, many academics were there, then directors, and it was such a huge group, and for them only I translated those 2 plays. And the academics were very happy with the translations,
Okay.
and they were more happy with the one with lots of footnotes and all. So that
Yes, as
only
you
I
were saying, yes, Bijoy, that is what, like, when footnotes come in, it tends to break the, like, when you're reading it,
yeah.
it becomes
That's
a
why
kind of obstruction.
that's why it's
Yes.
very important to know the target actually reader for whom I am translating. If the readers are academics, then
Academic, you will have to do it.
yeah,
Yes.
they will have to. So, and one of the academics, actually, he was teaching in Brooklyn University, teaching plays. So he asked for my consent to use it as a reference. I gave him the consent then and there.
Yeah. So, Ashish, are you there? You are there, but I don't know whether you can hear us or not. So,
Then I'll come to what Ashish had left. That
yes, yes, please.
you had said about this
Every
categories.
word is culture oriented.
No. That was the first one. I mean techniques.
Yeah, techniques. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Give us your view on that.
But
Right.
there are different types of translations and modes of translation and techniques. Like different types of translation and different modes of translation techniques are also there.
Mhm.
As a translator, I use all the techniques, all the modes. I'm not aware of this. This identification of techniques, modes, all these are important when while describing the process of translation. This comes into picture only. Since I didn't have any academic background and I did the translation, so I started looking for literature on this, and I found that there are 7 techniques and there
Okay.
are 8 modes of translation. Let me read out actually. I have taken some notes. The
Okay.
7 techniques are borrowing. The first one is Kark. The second one is Kark, and third one is literal translation, and fourth one is transposition, and fifth is modulation, and sixth is reformulation or equivalence, and the seventh one is adaptation. These are the techniques. The one who is practicing translation, even without knowing all these things, he will be doing.
Maybe unknowingly you don't know that
No,
it's
I
a
don't
technique
know.
that you're using.
Only after reading those literature, I came to know that I have been doing all the things. I use all the techniques, all the methods when I do translation unconsciously, without any, without my know.
Right,
Without my
Ashish,
know.
do you want to add to it if you can hear us? Ashish, just let me know when you are there. When you
I'm always there, but the thing is my audio is not getting connected. There is some problem with the
so
internet
now we
connection.
can
I'm
hear
not
you,
that
Ashish.
way.
Now we can hear you. So let's hear
Yeah.
something from you. I will not put anything across to you.
What?
Just want to hear from you about what you were talking about,
No, I was just listening to what you people were talking about, and what I gather is that I completely agree with Vijay that there is something known as the pleasure of translation. You know what the pleasure of translation is?
Yes.
It's something like, I have read a good text and I want you and the other friends of my Northeastern Forum also to read it.
He's having quite a lot of problem here, Ashish, with connectivity. So once again, we switch off to someone and then he comes back. So anyway, so this time when he comes back, we'll go to him immediately. And as we were talking about, we were, Bijoy, before you moved on to techniques, Ashish, we can see you, but then can we hear you also?
Yeah, I'm trying my best, but my audio is not getting translated, so it's something like that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Before my audio gets muted again, let me just tell you, keeping all the theories aside, something known as the pure pleasure of translation is the pleasure that a translator would like to have and share with the reader. Okay,
Right.
it's like sharing a good thing with good friends. I have a text which I like. I feel that this is something which should not be limited to me as a happiness giving, entity. I want to share it with you. So that is basically what translation to me is all about. Once you're translating, none of these theories that we speak about or academic.
Well, like, sometimes I wish we were in the normal circumstances when we could just sit on the stage together and we could talk and there would be no such
Yeah, yeah.
interruption.
That
But
would
then one
have
good
been
thing
my-
is that, like, we are all
Yes.
coming together, one from Mizoram, one from like Manipur, and he from, this wouldn't have happened otherwise. All right. So are you back,
Mm.
Ashish?
I'm back very much.
Okay, then please continue.
Yes, I'm back.
Yeah, Ashish, continue.
There's something wrong. Okay.
Fine.
So what I was just saying is that every translation, every translational text, every text that is translated is first translated and then theorized upon. So theory comes later, first comes translation. So as I said, the first most important thing to me is the pleasure of translating a text, the sheer pleasure of sharing a text with a group of
Exactly,
people,
yes.
avid readers who might not know.
Again, because I wanted to ask him while you were saying the sheer pleasure. Sometimes it so happens that you have not picked up a particular book to translate. Someone has given your commissioned one. So how do you, what do you do about it? So you may have
I don't
accepted it.
do it.
Yes,
No,
Ashish?
no. As Professor Zama said, yes, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes, now we can. Without
Hello.
book coming.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
Look, there are three types of translation. A natural translation, a translation which is a translation of love, a machine translation which is a pure robotic or mechanical translation, and a quasi-mechanical, quasi-robotic translation. Now, when someone gives me a commissioned piece to do it,
Right.
and I don't enjoy it, that is not a natural translation.
Okay. He's on and off. So I hope he comes back quick.
Yeah, and you always have and you always have the choice of not doing it. Okay.
Yeah. We missed
Hello?
a little bit of what you had said because your audio went off. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, I just said that when you are commissioned to do a translation
Right.
as a professional translator and you do not have the pleasure principle working there, it might not live up to the expectation, remember. It becomes almost a quasi-mechanical sort of a translation. So
Sure.
the love of the translation as a love, product of love, is very important, and that is creative translation.
Yeah. Right.
Is that
Yes, yes. Like again, Ashish, well, he's off again. So this I put to both of you here. In fact, three of you, if Ashish, you can hear me. Like, idioms and phrases are very rich part of a language.
Yes.
Right. So, like, when you come across idioms and phrases which are so very, like, you want to put it, but you can't translate. Idioms and phrases, like, it's very
Yeah,
difficult to
yeah,
translate.
right.
So, what do you do? Do you find an equivalent? That's what I want to know. Bijoy,
Yeah,
what do you
that's-
do about it?
Yeah, first I try to find an equivalent idiom in the target language.
Right.
Just now I remembered. Our DN Besvarua, our founder president, he had said once that it's seen to translate idiom. So we have to find an equivalent. Or say if you can't find the equivalent, just translate the idea, not the content.
Mhm.
The idea,
Yes.
idea only, not the content.
But something is lost, like,
Yeah,
there
something
you
is
have-
lost. That
yes.
you can't help. Say and about this, I'm coming back to that culture. Culture specific words are there which can't be translated. Say even in Assamese, that women's dress mekla. Can you translate it? No,
Sorry,
you
what
can
was that,
just say
Bijoy?
you can just explain it. It's just explain it. It's a lower garment of Assamese woman. So, in my opinion, I think we need to leave some of the culture-specific words
Mhm.
in the target language. this will give what you call a local flavor to the target language, to the local flavor of the source language into the target language.
Yes.
I think such terms are very easy to explain also. That, but there are some terms are there which you can't explain within the
You can't.
sentences.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you have to keep a glossary or a note at the end or footnote. So many techniques are there for that.
Yeah, but idioms and phrases, I think that's the
the
most
idioms and phrases,
challenging part.
You
Because
can't,
glossary will not help them. You cannot do a
glossary
literal
will
translation.
not have just translate the idea, not the content. If you translate the content, it will carry no meaning in the target language.
True. And Ashish, are you there? Yeah.
I'm there, yeah.
Yeah, Ashish, what do you have to say about this? Like, idioms and phrases. I am sure there are lots in Kokborok also, and you have translated from Tripura Bangla. So how, I'm sure there are lots of idioms and what do you do with? I mean, how do you translate?
First of all, if I go back to this notion of certain words which cannot be translated,
right?
Now, if I go up to that particular notion and take that point up, I would say that every
we keep on losing him. This audio, like. We can't hear you, Ashish.
Ashish, if you can hear me, turn off your video and only use the audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Can you turn off your video and only use the audio?
I have turned off my video.
Yeah, yes,
I have turned off my video. This is because of poor network connectivity in this particular place.
Yes, yes, we can understand.
I was speaking about the lack of translational ability. I said that there are certain words in every particular culture which are unique to that culture. This is simply because that culture, that particular topography, that geography, that language has certain words which are close to the lifestyle and which might be missing in some other culture. Okay. So automatically there comes a point where you say, okay, I cannot translate that particular term. Say, as for example, you pointed out, that was Biabari, right? In Assamese,
Yes.
Chotimaladi.
Yeah.
Was it that? Biabari?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Similarly, we have something in Kokborok known as Maichu. Okay, there is something in Kokborok known as Mozdeng. There is something in Bangla known as, say, for example, Alta.
Okay, Ashish. Meanwhile, Margaret, can we hear from you about those Mizo phrases? What do you do about it? Margaret, don't tell me you also lost there.
Yes, yes,
okay.
yes, yes.
You can hear me. I was scared.
I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Right. Yeah, we can.
I'm okay. I'm not sleeping. Yeah, like I said earlier, what I do is, since you really one cannot really find an equivalent, let's say for the word Klomgaina, as they always say, but after a comma, one kind of explains it. So you inbuild it in your translation, or if it is something that is so culture specific,
yeah,
it needs a longer kind of explanation. You can't really inbuild too much into the text, because don't forget you're doing a translation. So you're doing a translation belong to somebody else. So otherwise, that certain liberty I take, and the translations I've done so far, I think I've managed them, in the sense that I've been able to do, but it is sometimes problematic, because these are, as Ashish had pointed out, culturally and socially constructed words, with a lot of notions behind, lots of cultural notions and meanings and subtexts and so on. So if you want your reader to really get into the groove, as it were, and to understand what you are saying and doing, sometimes it's good to have your notings, to have your note, your footnotes, because after all, at the end of the day, somebody is reading the translation of a work that was in a vernacular, in a different language, but is interested to know about that culture, the people of that region. So it's good to give them, whatever we can. So in that sense, Bijoy, we were talking about the different kinds of translations. So here, especially for literary translations, and which, institutions like Sahitya Academy and all give very great importance. So you have to have a glossary, because they are dealing with the, many, many languages of India. So, the glossary becomes such a good guide for us to understand nuances, idioms, phrases, colloquialisms, of other languages. It really does. It really helps. Although, yes, it breaks into the spontaneity sometimes, but because, as I said, translation, literary translation, so we need to also learn something apart from, and then, Shruti, if I may just add some more here, since somehow it's sad that Ashish is not coming in well. I think your question posed to him was, where he had said that, first of all, translation should be a pleasure, there should be this feel-good factor. I think all of us totally agree, because at the end of a translation, when we conclude our translation, then we feel a sense of achievement. We feel that it's a job well done, as it were. But I think for many of us, for me, for instance, when I got into translation, it was really, due to compulsions. For Northeast Writers Forum and our Katha translation project, that 1990 to 2004, 5, like that. So because I'm mentioning 2000, published after the long years of, to and froing and all with our translators and editors. So that is one. And so it came to me as a kind of, it was a compulsion. So that I wanted to say that it wasn't something that I thought I would even enjoy. I did it out of a sense of duty, because I had to coordinate, I had to write the introduction, particularly to that first volume, Heart of the Matter, that was published in 2004. So it was more out of a sense of duty and so on. But, I also, now I have no regrets, and I continue to translate, because I owe so much to my work as translator to be unhappy about it. I don't complain. It has helped me motivate, facilitate into the, now having grew a group of, very, very volume of contemporary short stories edited by me, where I involved 15 translators, and we translated 18 stories, So that was published by Sahitya Academy. So in that sense, we've really grown to enjoy and expose the homegrown talent of our own Mizo writers beyond our borders. Otherwise, they would never be read and people would never appreciate them. So it's worth being a translator, and that thorough satisfaction. I don't think that, I don't take it as a thankless job. I'm just quoting your question, that it's a thankless job. No, not at all. And is it work translator? Yes, it's a very, very enjoyable, literary occupation for me, at least. Yeah, I wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Bijoy, about this translation, poetry and fiction, you translate both, just as Margaret also does that. So, which do you prefer? I mean, which you enjoy more? I sometimes I feel this poetry is very difficult to translate. So I just want to know.
Poetry is sometimes very difficult. Poetry is very personal to the poet. And and the poet has done lots of linguistic manipulations. Then the words are transformed and twisted to give a lyrical meaning. So first of all, I have to read the poem many times. And if I know the poet, then I can ask him. Still, I may not be able to get a correct idea sometimes. Sometimes poetry is very difficult. But what I find is that performance plays are more difficult than translating poems, because performance plays actually
Okay.
I have to do research because since so many things are involved in that, by simply reading the text I won't be able to grasp what is there. So I have to do a research on my own. Then as I said, I have to later on I have to meet the director, then the playwright, and I have to see how the dialogues are delivered. Then I said to the place, only then I could grasp the finer internal meaning, then I could translate. But sometimes it's very difficult. And poetry also I found some very difficult to translate and some very easy. It all depends on what sort of work you are going to translate. Sometimes poetry is very difficult, sometimes others, even prose are very difficult. Anyway, generally poetry is difficult.
Okay, here, Ashish, are
Metaphors
you
are
there?
there. Metaphors are there.
Yeah.
So many things are put into that.
Yes, that is a very difficult part, like, metaphors and
Yeah.
symbols.
Poetry can be simple poetry, or so many metaphors are there.
Yes.
And one more thing is that metaphor is slightly easier in the sense that metaphors and similes, if you translate, then it doesn't lose the character and the meaning. But this becomes a problem only when some culture specific words are there in the metaphor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Similes. Like I remember that you can replace an equivalent one. Or that Sarojini Naidu is known as Nightingale of India, but in Hindi it is translated as Bharatiya Kokila. Nightingale is an European songbird,
Yeah.
which is not there in India. So they have replaced it with Kokila. I mean, like cuckoo. Then in Manipuri it is translated as Bharat ki Koini, that is the Bulbul of India. Bulbul is taken as a songbird of India. Like this, you can
Okay,
find
yes.
equivalent. Otherwise, you can translate similes and metaphors. Only when some particular words are there, that makes it difficult. And idioms is totally different. You have to find equivalent idioms. Otherwise, you have to translate the same song.
But sometimes it's very difficult to find too.
Yeah.
And then you will simply have to let go.
Slightly
Forget
easier.
about that line.
Yeah, nowadays it's slightly easier. I used to open that. There is and so many things I have to open big books on. You have to type some particular words and go and idioms containing these or phrase containing these words. You can search on Google, then you can find.
Bijoy, as you were talking about, translating plays, here I want to ask you, something strikes me here, that when in a play, there can be two dialects.
Yeah.
Okay. So someone speaking in one dialect and another in another dialect. So how do you translate that into English?
It is practically impossible to do this. Here lies the translator's skill. The translator must be very familiar with the original language and the dialects as well. That it's very difficult to translate the dialects into English. So he has to reconstruct it. So here comes in the skill of the translator. So that is why many people has proposed authorship for translators. There are certain things which can't be translated in place. You can always adapt it to that cultural context. I remember one play that Ibsen's When We Dead Awaken. There, one of the characters is a professional hunter. Professional hunter is not there in Manipur. I have translated only the dialogues. Then Ratanda, he has adapted it to our culture. So
okay.
This can be done. When cross culture this thing is not found, then we can adapt it to the culture of the target.
Margaret, what do you do? Have you come across such texts where you have two different dialects? and you have to, like, it is lost when you are doing it in English. That's what I feel. So how do you tackle?
Not really, so I cannot say, but I have some input to give here. I think we all know Kin Pham Nong Kindri
Yes,
from
yes.
Shillong, who's with the Department of English, NEHU.
Mhm.
When I was coordinating the volume for Heart of the Matter, the first story that is there in the volume is Civility is All That Counts. It's a short story by S.J. Duncan, and it's translated by him. And in the midst of our work, and in those days, he rang me up and he said, Margaret, you speak to the Katha people. The editorial board refuses to accept this translation of mine, and I have worked so hard with it. And I actually had read the translation because I had been sent a copy, and I found it so well done. So, I wanted to mention his name because he is one translator who has excelled in this ability to translate. The language register is so well done here. The Kasi, illiterate Kasi man,
Yes, yes.
who wants to sell his vehicle, and he speaks in broken English, and they are bargaining and things like that. It is so comic. It is so well done. You just have to read it. And anyway, I spoke to Katha, to Gita Dharmaratna. They have in fact put it as the first story in the world. And then I think you'll get an answer also to the question that you have posed. Sometimes it is managed. It can be done by translators. It can be done. And Shruti, can I just say something about
Yes, yes, sure.
what I find most difficult about translating something? Definitely, I agree with Bijoy. It is poetry, and in fact, I'm so intimidated by poetry. I think it is people like Bijoy and all, who are poets at heart. We are told that we are all poets at heart, but maybe I'm not, because I'm intimidated, because you see, any satisfactory translation of poetry, I feel, is best left to translators who write poetry themselves. And of course, this is based on my own assumption, because they would have a better understanding of the nuances of poetical syntax, arrangement of words, this, that, which I don't think I'd be able to do justice. So, some even believe that novels can survive translations, but there are scholars who feel that poetry loses its magic the moment it is translated, because the flow and the lyric, they get lost. They get lost. So I'm intimidated by this, and I don't even try to. But chants, when I'm translating folk tales and so on, 2-line chants, 3-line chants, those things I can manage, but not poetry per se.
Poetry is difficult. So, like, Bijoy, you have done wonderful job with poetry when you're translating from Manipuri to English, and
Exactly.
the other way around.
Thank you so much.
And
This reminds me of something.
And Robin Gongom also.
Yes, Robin.
Yeah.
Of course.
They have done good translations. Yeah.
Yes, Bijoy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to say something. Once, let me find. I had noted it down somewhere. Actually, I just collected. Pradeep Acharya, Pradeep Da, he has said something. Actually, I don't know the exact word. I don't remember. I had noted down his words. He says that poetry is such a thing that it loses its flavor and the country of origin. It's like, okay, he has used a metaphor. It's like a country liquor. It loses its flavor and some words he has used. I had noted it down. When you sip it in a foreign country, the exact words I had noted somewhere here. So poetry, once you translate into another language, the flavor, everything goes. It's very difficult to retain the original flavor.
Sure. Okay, so before we go on to take some questions from the chat box, because quite a lot of questions have come in.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to ask is, Bijoy, what do you have to say about the notion of authorship like, versus the translator?
Yeah, I had just mentioned and sometimes
As you had mentioned, yeah, that's what.
translator does a lot of work on his own actually to put across what the original writer has done without deviating from the meaning storyline, but he has to adapt it to that situation and culture, everything of the target language. So in such cases, I think translator works as another author, recreating the work in the source language. So some people have proposed authorship for translators, not only for translators. Authorship extends to the editor, so many other persons who are involved in the creative work. For film, actually, that it's not for the literature. In case of film, play or others, then they want to include the director and other photographer, everything as a whole. Then the definition of authorship is changed.
Okay, so Margaret, would you like to add to it, or like,
Yeah.
or we will, yeah.
Yeah. Briefly, I had just written down some points regarding of authorship versus the translator, as it were. What I had said earlier before, I stand by that the author, the writer of a text, the first touchstone, and then the translator comes second. So, let's be honest, the translator is nowhere without a text to translate, right? If he doesn't have a text to translate, the translator is nowhere really. So given the fact that authors would dearly love to have good translators to facilitate the dissemination of their works, for many reasons, not least of which is the idea of having a wider readership, a commercial angle also might be there. Yet we must also admit that there is some truth in the notion promoted by some quarters that translation is a parasitic activity. Translators, we are parasites.
Yeah, I agree with Margaret.
And
it's not parasite. It's not parasite, but I agree that
it's not my usage.
No, actually, without the translator,
and
also
the
that author will not go
persona
outside his closed circle.
Right. It would not have gone out to the
it
wider
will
reading
not
public.
gone out.
Right.
And
yeah.
I do translation,
and
only because I feel that that writings in Manipuri is not going outside, going out of the state. That's why I do. Otherwise, translation for me, it takes 10 times more labor, time, and it
than your original work. Yes.
It kills my creative energy for writing. So I was planning to write a novel, and I did lots of research. That was in 2002. Then so many translations I had to do, then I couldn't do that, and still it's lying in my computer. Those small points have what called.
Okay, Ashish, are you there? I think we have totally lost him. So
okay, we lost him for the day. Yeah. He's not coming back.
He's not coming. Okay, Margaret, we'll come back to whatever you want to add to this. But here are a few comments we would take. That is, Mitra Fukan had talked about something. Bilingual editors are also very important. Yes. Mitra Fukan, she's here. So she says that bilingual editors are also very important. That's a comment from her.
That's very important. That's true. Yes. That's true. Yeah, they are.
And yes, Margaret, did you want to say something about this? Okay, so here Arzuman,
especially from places like our regions, for example,
Yeah.
The editor is very, very important, because
yes,
we are dealing with inexperienced translators most times,
True.
And we have to guide them. So it is a very difficult job.
Like another here, about when we about like, okay, Arzuman Ara, she asks, what happens when you translate your own poems, writings into English? Do you find similar problems that you're talking about?
This reminds me of Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore, when he translated Gitanjali, he has taken so much liberty. Actually, so it can be said that Gitanjali and Bangla and Gitanjali in English, these are two different books having common theme.
Okay.
Yeah, he said that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like, but then do you write in Manipuri as well as in English? So you
Yes.
translate sometimes from Manipuri to English? And
Actually, I do like this. What I have noticed is that first line is important for me. If I start the first line in English, then it comes to me in English, the following lines. And if I write in Manipuri, then the following lines that comes in Manipuri. Then this more difference I have seen, noted. Once I start writing in English, then I tend to give so many details because I presume that what I'm writing is meant for someone who knows nothing about Manipur. This automatically comes in, and when I write in Manipuri, I give everything short. I don't give any description, and that's like very short. I presume that everyone in Manipur or everyone who knows Manipuri knows all these things. So I don't translate my own work.
you've never
Sometimes
done
I
that?
write. Huh?
You've never done that?
No,
Even you have never translated your own work?
I don't translate, but I rewrite.
Okay, all
I
right.
rewrite. I rewrite the same story in Manipuri and in English. These two are different versions. That is what I said. Rabindranath, he has done the same thing. Gitanjali, when he translated it into English, it comes out differently.
Right. And what do you have to say, Margaret, about this?
Well, I don't write poetry, and I haven't translated
No, your
poetry,
stories.
so but regarding stories, because I write in English, so there's no question of
You don't translate your own story
into
Mizo?
Mizo, no,
You haven't.
not
Okay.
yet. No, not yet.
Okay. So there's another question, but this was to Ashish. But I think you can take it up as English is giving an international focus to Northeast literature. I find certain issues with some of the translations about passing an examination. Many have written passed out.
Yeah.
Passing an examination, passed out, instead of simply passed. About grinding of spices, one has written grinded and one used grounded. I have seen that this creates an issue for the native speakers. What about good copy editors in Northeast who can be assets for she's talking about the same thing about editors. Are there people who can be helpful in these matters? What about training more copy editors? She's talking about, this is Arzu's, I think. Or is it from, no, this is from Mitra Fukan.
Yeah, this thing is there everywhere.
Yeah, Shruti.
Oh, no,
This
that
is from
was from
Arzuman.
Arzuman.
Yeah.
Yes, from Arzuman.
Yeah. Actually, it's true, because all of us have gotten into serious translation of late. It's still of recent origin, shall we say. I think it, at least for most of the regions, maybe with Assamese literature, we can't say that, but I think we will gradually refine this. And over here, it is the bilingual author who is very important, because if help is needed, it should always be, taken. If it is a single work and somebody takes up a whole lot of works, and takes care of the editing, I think there's bound to be gaps like this. And I have found sometimes rather poor translations grammatically. See, although I have found some gaps in my own editorial works also in my most recent volume in about a couple of places, but I think these were,
This editor's
things that I
job is
hope
very
something
important.
which is very, very which is very relevant. So the editor should seek help also, I feel, from someone who's competent in both the language, like the editor himself. I
Yeah.
think that's important. This process will be refined, as we move on and as readers become more vigilant, I hope, and they give constructive feedback to editors and to the translators. This will help. Otherwise, if there is no constructive feedback, as it were, maybe it would be difficult to also identify where the gaps are.
Yeah, sure.
So the reader is also important. The reader also.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, very rightly said. Yes. And actually, there was this question to Ashish, but Ashish is not there. I don't know. This is something to do with, this is from Sukla Sinha.
Yes.
Sir, in Tripura, we have the Shuddha Bangla and the Choti Bangla. Should there be any difference in the English translation of a text according to the Bangla variation? How would an English translation of a text written in Choti Bangla be different from that of a text written in Shuddha Bangla? As we were talking about dialects, I think almost the same
dialects
thing.
and slangs. Dialects, yeah, the dialects. It depends on the translator. It depends on the skill of the translator. So
But
he
even,
can differentiate. If two people are talking in different Banglas, then the translator can make the difference. That this one in English also you can make the slang like that. Only variation. It depends on the skill of the translator.
yes, I think, but it's a very difficult,
It's a very difficult. It's a
very difficult task.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult thing.
Exactly.
You reconstruct the whole thing.
Yes, suppose in Ohomia, like, someone is speaking in Nolbari Ohomia, and someone in
I
Jorhoti
understand
Ohomia.
that.
So
Right.
how do you translate that? Mitraba, you are there, aren't you? So, like, how do you translate that? That is a very difficult part. Like, and
Actually, Metro is not, if not,
yeah,
as a translator, I'll do like this. I'll take up some as a general language, and then sometimes I'll be very true to the what you call the original. Sometimes I deviate from it just to give some slight difference.
okay, right. So that is something even I had faced, like, it's very difficult. So sometimes I think should we put Birmingham English and Coventry English, because both English is very much different. So like it'll be like kind of a dialect.
Yeah, like that only you can.
Right. Okay, so
Yeah.
so there are no
Can I
questions. Yes, please. Yes, please, Margaret. Margaret, actually, I actually wanted to ask you, Margaret, about.
Yeah, I really.
Yes. Margaret, your audio is cracking. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to add something to this because I feel this very important. Can you hear me?
Yes, very much.
We can hear you. Can hear me. Yeah. So, yeah, because now we are getting into the politics of translation.
Yes,
and I wish Ashish was here because, this was, the point that he had made the other day when we all met, and when we all met over the, and he had contributed that.
Yeah, that is what actually I also wanted to ask you, politics of translation. Yes.
Yeah, because this is, without getting critical, and especially with direct reference to what we were talking about just now, your previous question, we have what is called, often called the horizontal and the horizontal and the vertical translation by an theorist, Gianno Franco. Very briefly, it refers to question of power, which is a result of cultural divergences, okay, that influence translation between neighboring languages as significant, and this is significant, but it is also significant in the case of languages which are not obviously proximal. That I'll just explain it a bit. I'll just expand on that. You know, power politics is present in both types of translation. That is the horizontal and the vertical, because in the Latin to another European language, Latin was considered as the status given to Latin language was high. But when you talk about horizontal language, horizontal translation, let's say between Hindi and Bangla, we might say that the status enjoyed by both the languages is more or less the same. But if you are translating from a major language to a vernacular, or a vernacular language into a major language, what happens is that the same power politics is still at play in both types of translations, such as preoccupations that two linguistic communities may have about each other, also in the differential and hierarchical relations that the two languages may have, and so on. So when you're talking about the two languages just now that we spoke about in Tripura, also that question, I hope in a way I'm able to address what was being asked over there.
Right.
And
Yes.
I had spoken earlier about the importance of the selection of text also. This is also where the politics of translation comes. Because
can you put mute here? Mute.
Yeah, we were talking about politics of translation, and this politics of translation comes into play in the choice of the work to be translated, as I had spoken about earlier. The target readership that I'm aiming at also, vis-a-vis the commercial or other ideological reasons that we had touched on. So, and also the translator's choice of translating strategy, all of these actually involved. So why has the translator used English, for example? I will just take, why has the translator used English as the target to read readers? See, accessibility, especially from our point of view, Mizoram. Apart from
Margaret, your voice is
writer and the work for the rest of the world, the political highlight and otherwise unknown or the political device. Let us list particular.
I think she has delinked or Dipankar, what's the matter? Can you just check in? Meanwhile, Bijoy, do you have to add anything to this politics of translation?
I have no idea what politics
okay.
of
all right, doesn't matter. But would you like to add anything? Here, Smruti Shweta, she has written this in the chat box. While translating, you may find certain elements, descriptions, proverbs, or old sayings that have a local essence and build that aura when written in that vernacular, local language.
Yes.
How do you keep that essence intact while translating without losing out on the local essence? So what are the do's and don'ts? That's what she wants to know. The local essence to preserve.
We have discussed part of this, idioms and phrases. If it is
that is a part,
we have to find an equivalent one. Otherwise, some language and what called regional specific or what culture specific, very specific term is, as we have also discussed this about this, we can either use glossary or a footnote, or say in the sentence itself we can give the meaning
No,
of the.
Bijoy, actually what I think she meant is you have the local, like, when you are translating, say, from Manipuri, there is a certain essence in that Manipuri literature that, when you know that there is that smell of Manipuri there.
Yeah,
How do you
that is why I said that some of the words actually we need to retain in the, that is borrowing. We can borrow some words actually in the target language from the source language. This will give a local flavor of the source language in the target language. We need to keep. Sometimes we can translate everything, but still, if we want to give a local flavor to the translated work, then we need to borrow some words from the source language into the target language. So the same word we can carry over. I mean, same words can carry over. It can be carried over to the target language.
Yeah. Yes, maybe we can like, there's certain words being retained. For instance, like, in God of Small Things, auntie, yes, instead of writing auntie, uncle, you have your own mahi pehi.
Retaining is the same thing.
Margaret, okay, again she's Margaret, are you there?
Difficult to translate.
Yes, it is difficult, but then, like, you have to retain that flavor. That's what she said, like, otherwise you are giving something to the world, this part of the world, the corner of the world, like, you're giving it to the wide world. So something of Manipuri, something of Mizoram, something of Assam should be there, whatever the literature. Margaret, what do you have to say something? I hope, I don't know whether you have heard us or not during this time.
No, I didn't hear anything, and I don't know where I got cut off. So, I won't go over.
You were talking about the politics of translation.
Yeah, you're talking about politics of translation.
Yeah, that I do. I know that. And so, translation, especially for regions like ours, is not apolitical. It is what shall we say, linked with notions of marginality, periphery, identity, just now as Shruti was saying, So, just to make a point, in fact, I want to refer to something here. To expand the above point further, why do we involve ourselves? Oh God. Oh, anyway, can you hear me?
Yes, we can carry on.
Yeah, because there were so many other people. To expand the above point further, why do we involve ourselves translating our folk tales, for example, which were earlier considered fit enough only for children, for small children? You see, besides the aim to project our culture and tradition to others, that is to outsiders, others other than those from our region, it is also very much an effort to communicate to the younger generation, to our younger generation, about their origins, values of their tradition and culture, and providing insight into the, what we call the IKS, indigenous knowledge systems of the forefathers, and so on. And in the process, instill in them pride in their identity and origin. So you see, even within our own intra-translation, we have our own ideological reasons for translating, folk tales, and other than the fact that we want others to learn about us. Now over here, Shruti, if you will allow me, I want to bring in Janice Pariyat. I think all of us are familiar and have read her work, especially Boats on Land, which was published in 2012 by Random House India, and which had received the Sahitya Akademi Yuva Puraskar Award in 2013. I really love to read her, because the manner in which she uses what we were talking about earlier also, and this comes into, I feel, politics of translation, although I don't know if she's consciously doing it, but the manner in which she sprinkles Khasi words, without feeling the obligation to use italics to kind of segregate the word or to exoticize it, and also without the obligation to burden her stories with footnotes or a glossary at the end. You find this easy blending, shall I say, or word transference, And I feel that because I've taught many of her texts in my class, so I feel that she's breaking down barriers of a privileged language like English. How? Because she, of course, writes in English. So the stories that I'm referring to are not translated stories, but in a way it's relevant because she's bringing in her own local words, into her stories. If you read, for example, Echo Words, I just love the way in which she mentions Khasi cuisine, the different Khasi dishes made from pork. And she will simply use do jam, do senyang, do kle, and she will leave it to the reader to find out what
Exactly.
it means,
Yes.
If the reader is interested enough,
Yes.
they can jolly well go and find out what it means. That kind of, that is, one factor that I find in her works, which I feel writers from Northeast should emulate.
Like, yes.
There is a certain,
and as you're saying, Margaret, like, our Arune Kashyap, he has done a lot of translation and also his own work where he puts Assamese words without putting any footnotes or glossary. Let the people find out. Like, just as we find out when there's a French word or a Spanish word coming into it, we find out.
Exactly. Right.
So I think that is another thing that translators should do. Instead of trying to
and
explain
this
everything.
and this comes into the politics of translation, because here we are trying to privilege our own vernacular, our own language as well. That it is not only worth reading or translating, but it is something that, is just as equal in the equal playing field with, say, a global language like English.
So I think, Rashmi, should we wind up now? Because there is just one thing that, there's a comment actually from Mitra Fukan. I'm very proud of the fact that many of our members, especially today's panelists, are doing so much for the cause of translation. It's an ongoing thing. Yes, our members have done a lot of translation. You like about the Katha project, like Northeast Writers Forum had brought out volumes in translation. So that's a big work and individually also a lot of members are into translation. Rashmi, did you want to say something? I can see your hand raised here. Rashmi, yes.
No, then.
No, we're just in to listen to y'all today, Shrutiba, today.
Okay, because you had raised a hand. Yeah,
we're just listening to today's panelists.
No, actually,
please carry
just
on.
To continue with what I said, Pradipta has once said something, and I had noted it down. Pradipta has said like this: poetry is like local wine. It does not travel well. It tends to lose the aroma of harvest and history when shipped abroad. This is what Pradipta has said.
But there has been a lot of good translations also, we quite a lot of good translations. Without that, the translations, we would not have been so enriched, in the way reading so many different books. We sometimes we don't even know about what is the original. We think that this is the best. So I think the translators have a big job to give the best, because you have a bigger audience. That is why you want translation. You want the whole world to know what is being written in Manipuri, what is being written in Mizo, what is written in Ohomia, Bangla, or whatever. You want your work to go out to a wider world. So that is why translations, will be there. It has been used by people for centuries. In the beginning of the appearance of written literature, translation has always been there. If you go back to the old literature, Greek Roman literature. Without the translations, we would not be able to, they wouldn't have known what Homer was, what he was writing, what Aristotle was writing, talking about those old classics. So thank you so much, Bijoy, Margaret. It was so good connecting. And Ashish, it's like, sad that he couldn't be with us. He was there on and off. That is the problem of technology. It brings us together and it also cracks up. And all our participants, thank you so much for being with us. Do I wind up, Rashmi, Tubo? Would you like to come in? I don't know. Would you like to come in, anyone? Or should we just wind up? Rashmi, what do you say? Right, Dipanjal, yes. A
Yeah,
secretary comes in.
Before others come in, I would like.
You can do the honors and wind up.
Yeah.
Yes, you were saying something. Margaret, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I too wanted to thank everyone. It's nice to see old friends. I can see Dhruva, although he's keeping quiet, he's there. But I feel bad about Ashish. He would have brought more life into the discussion, It's unfortunate. And of course, you have done such a wonderful job, put us at ease. So, we were able to do and say what we wanted to say. So,
I feel as
thank
I'm
you
talking
so
to
much.
all my friends.
And
Thank
you,
Thank you.
Mitra also. Hi, Mitra, although you're not there to be seen, it's so nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tuba, would you like to? Yeah.
Yes, Shruti, thanks. A very good evening to everyone. Margaret, it's lovely seeing you after centuries. You spoke so well. You spoke so well.
Yeah.
Your article, analytical, and as usual, very humble. Despite having such a lot of, so much of academic and literary experience behind you. Bijoy, of course, Bijoy, we have been in touch so very often. It's once again lovely hearing from you. And Shruti, of course, I'm using the word "of course" a bit too often, which I think, how do you translate "of course" in all the languages? But all said and done, a lovely evening. Missed Ashish, but somehow I think Margaret's presence, very frankly, somehow compensated for his absence. And a very good evening, a very good job done, Shruti. You moderated very well. Thanks to me and Dipanjal and Dipankar, the Penshan group. Margaret, I hope everyone's fine at home. God bless.
Yes.
Bijoy, to you too.
Yes, we are fine. Yes, thank you.
So that was nice, and thank you. Behind the scene, we have Dipankar Jakaria and Rashmi doing a wonderful job.
Right,
Dipankar,
Rashmi.
Rashmi, yes.
Yes. Thank you, Rashmi.
Signing off.
Okay.
All right.
2 seconds.